once I hit that point with kids, I think that's my why. I was like, yeah, why not?
Welcome back to Listen to the Helpers, a podcast created by the Fred Rogers Institute to elevate the voices of helpers everywhere. Fred Rogers once said, "When I was a boy and I would see scary things in the news, my mother would say to me, 'Look for the helpers. You will always find people who are helping.'" Today, we're joined by Jen Sims, a native Pittsburgher and play therapist at the Redwood Center for Children and Families in Felton, California. At the end of this episode, stay tuned as Kenzie and I reflect on our discussion with Jen in the context of Fred Rogers' legacy and our own work at the Fred Rogers Institute. Jen, we are so thankful that you are joining us for today's episode of Listen to the Helpers. We'd love to start off by having you tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, where you're located now, a little bit about who you are and what you do.
All right, my name is Jen Sims. I am from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and I currently live in Santa Cruz County, California, where I am a play therapist and the clinical director of the Redwood Center for Children and Families. And we're a group practice, and we see children, families, and we also see some adults.
Awesome. So we know you have quite a following on social media. How did you get started on social media?
Well, I've always been like a fan of social media, and I've
Mhm.
also been so I've been posting on TikTok like since the pandemic, like you do, and probably a couple of years into posting on my personal account, I started making play therapy content. I was a school counselor for a long time, and I started making play therapy content before I left the school. But when I left the school and I was starting my own practice and I had a lot of time, I made a lot of content about how to educate people about what play therapy is, because I'd be like in my sessions or in the play and I'd be like, wow, it'd be really hard for a parent to get this concept and understand that like this really does work, because that's the big thing about play therapy. Like, you guys are just playing, you're not doing anything. I hear it so much. I have such a like an annoyed feeling. Like it works so well. I know so much about kids because of play. um anyway, I just thought, hey, this is like a great way to communicate what's happening in the playroom in real time through like these pretend stories that I make up and present. And I had been posting content for like 2 years, and then in, I think it was like April of 2024, one of them went really super viral. It's not even super viral, but it was one of those videos. I've never had one before or since where I was getting like 1,000 to 10,000 followers at once. And it was
Oh, wow.
really weird and wild. And so I gained like 40,000 followers in a day. And then I already had like a backlog of 2 years of play therapy education content on there. So there was like a lot of reason for people to stick around and keep pushing out that content. And then it just kind of has been growing from there to where now I'm like having a social media plan.
Wow, that's really exciting to bring that much attention to something so good as play therapy. And we all know Fred Rogers said play is the work of childhood. And
Yeah.
you're right, like play is so important, whether it's in the context of play therapy or just play for play.
Yeah.
It's so important. And we're curious to hear, how did you get your start in play therapy, that space in general, not just on your social media
Yeah.
platforms, but just getting involved in that work in general. What inspired you to do that, and how did you get down that path?
Yeah. Well, I had worked with kids at a school for about, I don't know, maybe about 3 or 4 years. And then I thought, oh, I've heard of this thing called play therapy. And I wonder what it's like, because working with kids, especially in a school, is getting into a lot of power struggles, which is like something I feel is my karma to work through. And I, and it's also doing a lot of directive therapy and doing a lot of things in service of the school. So, can you help this kid sit still to be in school? And I felt like there was something missing. So I started, just like people are doing with my channel, looking online and finding people who do play therapy and just seeing what it looked like, because there's other people out there who have videos with kids. And I watched those, literally just like one or two, and then I just went and tried doing some of the skills for the first time. And it was just a phenomenal moment of change, that I
Mm.
saw the kid feel like so relieved that like this is what we were going to do and we were going to play, that I could never go back. And then as I started learning about play therapy and themes and what it all means, I started understanding the children in a way that I never had before. And it was almost like scary, because wow, I had all this knowledge and I knew them in a way that I had never known them. And then we had the pandemic. And it was during the pandemic that I was like, I'm going to work with kids forever. Because though I worked at a school for 8 years, I kind of had this idea I was going to leave one day and go back to working with adults. Until I found out that, you know, I'm doing like the real therapy. I feel like I'm doing the real therapy
Yeah.
with kids. And I've been a therapist for 20 years, and I've done a lot of real therapy, real therapy. And like, this is some of the realest out there.
Wow, that's inspiring. And yeah, it's such important work.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to ask too, as someone who hasn't gone through like play therapy before, what is a typical like, what does that look like?
Yeah. And I have also not been through play therapy. So I feel like that is always a growing edge for me. It would look like a kid, me opening the door and saying to the child, "Hey, welcome to the playroom. In here, you can do and say almost anything you want to do and say." It wouldn't involve me using a lot of words, because I don't immediately want to engage their prefrontal cortex. I want them dropping down into their lower brain and their midbrain and feeling really, really safe and able to be in relationships and almost like lose their sense of reality, go to their land of make believe, so that they can say and do all these wild things that they have inside of them that they're afraid to share on the outside. And I'm using reflection and tracking and unconditional positive regard to help them feel seen, heard, and understood. And then they start playing out themes, and they'll play things over and over and over again in different ways. So, just to say, I let it kind of go like that. Like, I let it go. And if a kid's like, well, what am I supposed to do in here? I might say, oh, you don't know what to do. But it's going to give me so much information about who they are. Some kids are like, make believe, I'm ready. And other kids are like, can we do something like kind of structured first? But it's just about meeting kids where they are through attunement and trusting that their decision is the right decision in the playroom, and their way of healing and coming up with coping is going to far surpass anything I could ever dream up for them.
Wow, yeah, we talk a lot about the idea of trust in our work with the Fred Rogers Institute and the work of extending Fred's legacy. And we talk about that idea of trust having so many different layers, trusting in when you're working with children, especially the adult trusting in the child trusting in the adult trusting in themselves, the child trusting in themselves. So kind of it seems like all of that is going on in your space when you're doing that play therapy. I'm curious, do you have like a favorite kind of material that um, you're excited when kids start to engage with in that play therapy space where you're like, oh, that's interesting. Let's see where this goes.
Well, I would say that the process of the play is the most interesting thing, but there's things I love to play with. Like, I love to play with the dollhouse, because I loved to play with it. I expressed so much drama through my dollhouse. Like, thank goodness I had it to express myself. And I just love watching kids play in the dollhouse. But I also have this thing called the Nugget Play Couch, and I love when they get that out, because they can build forts, they can make cars, they can get way on top of it and peer down at me. it just gives them so much support in the playroom for the things that they want to do. And so I get really excited when they bring that out, and they can, and then it's whether or not they ask me to help them build something. They're using big muscles, they're pushing, they're pulling, and there's just so much going on when they're using that play couch. And one more thing, I think the sand tray, a child that will part some, when kids are getting a little bit older, they can do a little bit more directive sand tray, and then kids will just play in the sand tray. And I find that kids that build worlds in sand trays go on to know how to like build their own worlds. And so I find the sand tray work to be also really super valuable.
That's really interesting. And I love hearing you talk about like the nugget couch and the sand tray. I have a son who's a year and a half, and he's like at that age where there's like so many cool things that he's like, he can like get around on his own. He's developing more independence, and he's like starting to say some words, starting to like get those little hints of like imaginative play here and there. And I'm like so excited to get him involved in like the sensory tables and the sand trays, and
Yeah.
I'm even outside of like a play therapy perspective, just like as a mom, I'm excited to like watch that play happen over the next few years. So that's
Yeah.
nice
And
to hear you talk
it,
about those things.
yeah, it will tell you so much about who they are. And that's what hooks parents ultimately into play and play therapy, is that a play therapist, sometimes there's things I'm like, wow, I actually can't ever tell the parent this. Like it's not safe, like, but I know. And that's a tough part I think about working with children. Like things that you really can't always, you need to really work on the relationship to talk about. But I'm kind of going off on a tangent. But yeah, it's just the best way to get to know who kids are. And it's fun because I worked at a school for 8 years, so I got to see the development of children. And I also still live in the town, and but they don't really recognize me anymore, but I see them all the time. I see them in the grocery store, I see them in their school plays, I see them driving. And it's just amazing to see who they were and who a little bit about who they've become.
No, I love that. And I was going to say, in the spirit of your love of Fred, and your role as a native Pittsburgher,
Yeah,
how does your appreciation for Fred impact your role as like a play therapist?
yeah. Well, I was thinking about this and thinking about, so I think one of the things that Mr. Rogers had going for him was his ability to make a child feel worthwhile and meaningful, even if they were sitting anywhere in the world watching him. And I think that's why he's like one of the most famous figures of ever, all time. And when I was a kid, I lived down the street from him. I knew where his house was. We went to the same church. We were neighbors. So when I watched the opening of Mr. Rogers, I was like, where's my house? And I was really confused because I didn't understand why it didn't look exactly like my neighborhood, but I was like, I guess this one is my house. And so I knew where my house was. And so I truly felt that me and Mr. Rogers were in a not even a parasocial relationship, in a real relationship. And it was so real. Every summer, this happened 2 or 3 times. Me and my friends would be like, oh, Mr. Rogers has a pool, which he doesn't. Let's go swimming at his house because, like, why not? It's Mr. Rogers. We know him, he loves us. And we got a lot of mileage out of that love. And there would always be somebody at the door like, no, no, girls, you cannot come in and swim, there's no pool. But we would forget and do it again every year because like we were, I was 5 in Mr. Rogers' heyday. I was 5 through 8. Like that was my man. That was, so I think what I take from that into play therapy is that finding love and value in a child, and finding love and value in a child and helping them find their own meaning through being centered around them and fascinated and in love with them, is it overrides anything that I do. And uh, yeah, so I think that's what I learned from Mr. Rogers.
I love that. I love that story, that personal connection, and I love that you said, Fred Rogers and I were neighbors, and of
Yeah,
course, like everybody feels like Fred's neighbor because you hear that song, "Won't you be my neighbor?" and you're like,
yeah,
"Yes, please," but you actually were his neighbor,
yeah.
and that's such an interesting layer to that, relationship that you have to his work, to his life, to his legacy, and how you're continuing his legacy in the context of your role with play therapy and the family and with the families and the children that you serve. And Fred talked a lot about this idea of being a helper, looking for the helpers, and um, you are obviously one of the helpers of today. And we're wondering what do you think it really means to be a helper?
I think it means to help somebody find out who they are and develop the skills that work for them to live their best life and contribute the most to the world and just feel good. I don't think people need to feel great all the time, but I don't think they need to walk around like, using tools and skills. I want people to know themselves deeply and not be afraid of that because they're good. And that's what I think it means to help children and the world. And I would say, as a person, like as a therapist, and I think a lot of therapists do this, maybe I kept looking for like, what's the best way to help? Who's the best person to help? I worked with survivors, I worked with perpetrators, I worked, I tried different things like that, but I think like I'm like children, the root. This is the best. I want to get children where they right in their learning environment. And then the other thing is I just really like kids. I
Mm.
just really like to hang. I think they are very fun to hang out with.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's so hard when like I want to be a helper and I want to help, but what is the best way to help? And I don't know if there is a best way to help, but maybe each of us have like our own strengths that we can bring to whatever helping we want to do. And clearly you decided, working with children, that's my avenue of how I can be the best helper that I can be. And I think that's really admirable that you decided to, commit yourself to this helping profession.
Thank you. Thank you. It's not that I don't get any personal benefit. Children are just wonderful and funny and clever and inspiring to be around. And they're doing the work.
Yeah, and it's evident, just I'm sure I'm speaking for both of us, Sarah, but it's evident that these kids are very like loved by you and I'm sure are very appreciative of you even when they don't say it verbally.
Yeah.
Um, and
Not
I'm sure.
always. People, I would say not always. Anybody hearing this might be like, well, I fired Jen. But uh the people, but I have a long-term caseload at this point, and it's
Mhm.
because I love them. I mean, love is so real, and it's a different kind of love. It's, there's kids in the playroom. Anybody who comes into therapy knows their therapist in a way that nobody else does, and
Mhm.
that's real. And so there really is love, and there's detachment because it's a client, and I've worked with people who I have just randomly never seen again, and that's something that can be really hard. And so therapists need a lot of support around that, and also a level of understanding that you're there to help. You're not their family, but there's so much love in that, I think.
Yeah, and that's a good lead into my next curious question for you. I was just about to ask, like obviously in your role there are good days and bad days. Do you have a story you could share with us about a time that you remembered your why?
um a time that I remember, I mean, I would probably think that, so when the pandemic happened, hey, we're right. It was like today 6 years ago.
Yeah, yeah.
And I remember standing in front of a classroom and talking about being gone for 3 weeks, but I just knew I was lying. And I just think that was maybe the last time I lied to kids, because how could I sit on a Zoom with them? And then our town like burned down. We had a wildfire. and many children lost their homes, and so and we were evacuated for a while, and so like I'm sitting in my I mean, it's was so much wild stuff was happening. And for the first time, I was watching children in their homes, and I was like seeing their home backgrounds and seeing their hotel backgrounds or their evacuation rental backgrounds. And I couldn't, there was no gaslighting them through this. And once I hit that point with kids, I think that's my why. I was like, yeah, why not? Why
Mm.
not, kids? Why not have real relationships with kids forever and be really honest with them and promote their dignity, and also probably laugh a lot along the way. It is a very hard job. It's not easy. It's not always fun to play all day. I'm a grown up.
It is work.
It's work. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think based off of, and we've, talked to many people at this point in the podcast, this is the first why not we've gotten. And I really love that. Like, yeah, why not?
Yeah. Like, what else am I going to do? And um yeah, there's just there's something about that. There was just no going back. Just that being in traumatic times with kids, and like we're the same. Like there was an equalizing experience, and it gave me a lot of respect for kids to see them live through that experience. And I, during the pandemic, thought up the Redwood Center for Children and Families, and I was like, that's going to be my plan. That's what I'll do. And so that's what I did. And here I am. And then I was also making TikTok. I mean, I have a personal TikTok account. I have already made viral videos, but this is the one that has really moved my career forward, because it gives me the opportunity to tell so many more people about child-centered play therapy. And sometimes they're like, that's ridiculous. And but it's been a really fun, great learning experience.
That's beautiful. And I'm so glad that you're using this platform that you've built for something good and something important that is meaningful and impactful in such a positive way. Even if not everybody is on board with it for whatever reason.
It's hard to understand play,
Yeah.
from an adult perspective
Yeah, when
and
adults are
take
so
it
removed
seriously.
from play,
Yeah.
it's hard to view it as important work, but it truly is, and it sounds like you are doing the important work of reminding people of that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we're thankful for what you're doing for sure.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Do you have any final thoughts for our listeners as we wrap up our conversation together?
I want to talk about when I was in my 30s. I worked with people with developmental disabilities for many, many years before I was ever a therapist. And I had a client who loved Mr. Rogers so much. And every day before we went out to our work shift, because I was a job coach, he'd sit and watch Mr. Rogers. And we worked like I could see the KQED studios in Oakland from my office. And so I called and I was like, can I get a tour of this Make Believe Studios and Mr. Rogers Studios? Because I've got this guy who like loves Mr. Rogers so much. And so we made the appointment and we went for the tour, and we got a tour of all the whole studio. But then we got saw Make Believe, and then we got into there's like a place that overlooks Make Believe, like a little, I don't know, area. And my client was there, and then Mr. Rogers came out, and my client was like blown away. And he leaned down and he said hello. And my client said, "Oh, Mr. Rogers, you smell like coffee," which really means he was like, "Give me a cup of coffee." And he loved coffee. And then they sang "Won't You Be My Neighbor" together. And it was just a really wonderful, unforgettable experience for me, let alone my client.
Mhm.
And Mr. Rogers just had a spirit of generosity that is an abundance that is what makes him so special.
What a beautiful story. Thank you so much for sharing that. That's such a wonderful way to wrap up our time together. Such a wonderful, you know, bow on top of this conversation. And it was such a pleasure to meet you, to spend some time in conversation with you. We're so thankful that you gave us some of your time out of your busy schedule. And th this was just lovely. Thank you so much for being here.
I really appreciate the work that you're doing to continue Mr. Rogers' legacy. It's incredible. Thank you so much as well.
Kenzie, what did you think about our conversation with Jen?
I really loved getting to meet her. That was our first time getting to meet Jen, though we knew her work on social media.
Yeah, it was really interesting to get to know her. I think something unique about this particular episode is that we so far have interviewed and had people on as guests who have already kind of been in our Fred Rogers Institute atmosphere in some capacity, whether it's somebody who was a participant in Educators Neighborhood or somebody who is in the Fred Rogers Scholars Program or just somebody who, we've crossed paths with in some way. But Jen is our first guest who, like you said, like this was us meeting her for the very first time and getting to know her as a person and beyond, her social media platform for the first time. So that was an extra special kind of conversation with her.
Yeah, and within our conversation, I really liked the fact, and I didn't know this about her, that she started out as a school counselor and then made her way to being like a clinical director and a play therapist. I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, I didn't know that either, and it makes sense why that was her path. And I love that she talked about that transition from being school counselor to play therapist and really focusing in on play being like her preferred medium of therapy.
And this idea of, and something that was important to Fred was meeting people and children where they're at. And you could tell that in her work as a play therapist, that's what she does because she lets children take ownership of the conversation. She lets them pick out the toys that they work with. She doesn't talk to them. Like she lets them take the lead and she meets them where they're at. And I really love that about her work.
Yes, absolutely. I think that speaks a lot to this idea of self-worth. And I know, diving into our reflection related to the six fundamentals of learning and growing, um, I think her work very clearly uplifts the self-worth of her clients, of hopefully the families of the children that she serves too. I think it was interesting that she mentioned that there are some things that you can't share, maybe not fully share with the parents or the caregivers or the families of the clients of the children that she's working with, because that's a component of building and maintaining that trust with the children that she's serving as well. So, in addition to self-worth, I really feel like trust was a huge part of that conversation and a huge part of the work that she does. What did you think?
No, same. And of course, within these conversations, I'm sure these children, some of them or most of them, are gone through something traumatic that they have no control over. So to have that trust that they can feel their feelings without judgment or having those feelings or difficult thoughts shared out, even with other trusted adults, is still so important because they're just trying to process it. Like I'm sure there might come to a point where they do share their feelings with their trusted adults outside of Jen, but I still think that there's beauty in the fact that they can work those out in their own time, in their own comfortable space that I thought was super cool to hear from her.
Yeah, for sure. And I know I mentioned this before, but the idea of not only the kids trusting in her, her trusting in the kids, but her supporting these young people to trust themselves in the way that they play and the way that they feel what they feel and the way they express what they feel. She mentioned some kids might come in and be like, I don't know what to do when she says play or whatever she says. Um, they might be like, I don't know what to do. Can we have a little bit more structure? Can you tell me what to play? Can you tell me how to play? Can you give me some direction here? That is all a part of the process of her supporting these young people to trust in themselves and what they're capable of doing. So I think that also is a really beautiful thing to be able to support these young people in so many ways.
And also, like through her social media, advocate for play therapy and play. Because I think you said it yourself, like sometimes, and I think Jen said this as well, but like sometimes adults don't know how to think about play. And like we know at the Institute, because we talk about it often, like we play too. And sometimes that play might look the same as children's play, and sometimes it might not. Like reading can be playful. Fun conversations like the one we had with Jen today, that could be playful. And we had times of play. It isn't always obvious, but we all engage in play at least once a day, really.
Yeah, or at least we should. And
Yeah.
yeah, and I think when you're an adult or when you're a grown up and you're so removed from this idea of what we consider to be play, it's hard to view certain things as play that really are play for grown ups. And maybe we don't call them play, but like you said, reading, any kind of hobby is play. I mean, play is in the phrase, but playing sports. Like if you're going to the local YMCA and for, playing basketball, or like whatever just exercising could be a form of play for people. Really any type of thing that gives you joy. You said having a conversation, that something can be active or it can be not active. It can be anything that just makes you happy and brings you joy. That's definitely considered play, and I think grown-ups play more than they give themselves credit for.
And if you haven't today, maybe you need to think about how you play and what ways you can be a little more playful throughout your day.
Yes, that's a great thing to ask people to do. Kenzie, how are you gonna play today?
Funnily enough, Sarah, I painted my nails yesterday and then I messed them up in my sleep. So my
Hmm,
play is going to be fixing my nails when I go home. What is your
fun.
play going to be today?
That's a great answer. That's really fun. And I think my play is going to be that I am going to make pancakes for dinner. That I already knew that I was going to do that. But the play aspect of it is I'm going to make them into fun shapes and we'll just see how it goes. But it'll be more fun if I have pancakes shaped like hearts and whatever other shapes that I can think of. So that's going to be my playful thing of the day. And I think that's important too. It doesn't have to be a whole thing to play. A
Mhm.
playful moment can be play. So that's going to be my playful moment of the day. Um, and like you said, this conversation, that's our play today. That's our something fun today for sure. Kenzie, any other thoughts on this conversation with Jen?
I don't think so. Thank you so much, Jen, for meeting us and having this playful conversation today. The Fred Rogers Institute advances the legacy of Fred Rogers by investing in the strengths of families and caring adults to support the healthy development of children. To learn more about the Fred Rogers Institute and our initiatives, visit fredrogersinstitute.org and follow the Fred Rogers Institute on Instagram, Facebook, and X.